Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Change Agent Leadership. Today we're talking about something every leader faces, but few leaders actually prepare for. It's the moment when what used to work stops working, when growth slows, or when your team loses momentum, your habits feel stale, good habits feel stale, and maybe your spiritual or emotional life just feels fine, but not alive. Have you been there? Well, I have. And Nancy Duarte and Pat Sanchez, I think I pronounced their names right, call this the redream stage or moment in their book, Illuminate. And honestly, this moment is where maturity meets stagnation, is where most every meaningful transformation begins. You would think, well, maturity moving to stagnation, that's a bad thing. Can be, but it actually can lead to a time too, if you recognize it, which is what we're going to talk about today. If you recognize it, it's a great time to actually redream into the next stage of life. So if you're feeling any of the things I mentioned above, well, today I want to help all of us understand this better, why redreaming is essential for leaders, teams, and organizations. Also, how to recognize maybe when you're at the top of the curve. We're going to show a curve here in a little bit. When you're at the top of the curve and you're maturing or arriving in your location and your leadership where you are currently, well, what does that actually mean before you start to decline too far? How to redream your personal life and leadership for the next year or the next season of life. And then how often, if I'm a person of faith, if you are a person of faith, how can God use these moments to lead you into a new era? Like, what does that era look like? And how do I know where I'm supposed to go? It's going to be a very practical. I hope all my episodes are practical, but this one's very practical. We're going to show some graphs and some next steps that you can take in self-evaluation, especially as we come into a new year. And I hope that it sparks within you a dream to maybe redream, to maybe recognize, hey, have I maybe like maxed out here? Am I kind of hitting a rut? So, how does every leader need to redream, and why does every leader need to redream? Well, let's start with the visual. We're going to put the first visual up here, and this is a bell curve. You've seen this many times. Some people call it the S curve of growth. But everywhere from business strategy to human development to spiritual formation, it has these five stages on it, which is start, grow, mature, decline, and then death. So every ministry, every company, every project, every relationship, and yes, every leader, including myself, has moved through this curve multiple times. I mean, and on the left-hand side, you're going to see that innovation is going up and time is passing on the bottom there on the x-axis. So one of the things to keep in mind here is there's many ways to look at this. One simple way is that, well, where am I on this thing? We're talking about cycles of life and cycles of maturity. And so what time is it? Where are you at? Are you growing right now, entering the mature stage, which is great? Maybe you're excited where you are, but maybe you're starting to, you've plateaued a little bit and you're starting to decline. Well, what is that? How far are you declining before either your job, which is going to lead to a change, or to stagnation? And so we want to look at what most leaders get wrong, which is they think maturity means they've arrived. In other words, their innovation, their thought press has gone up. They've arrived. They know what's happening. They're comfortable. But the truth is, maturity is not the finish line. Maturity is the beginning of decline if you're not careful, unless you choose to redream. So what does that actually look like? Well, I'm going to put another slide up here. This is what in the book Illuminate, they talk about how to redream. And so instead of going into decline, there's a little bit of decline here. You can see the solid line there a little bit, but it turns into a dotted line because you actually stop declining because you've begun to redream. And so you can't avoid this entire bell cycle here. You are going to decline, but you can choose how to respond to it in a positive way. And instead of moving into decline too far, move into a redream. And so how does that happen? Well, we're going to talk today several ways to recognize and to move into a redream cycle, and then also how to zoom out a little bit. And so let's talk about how to recognize you're at the top of the curve. So how do you know when you're possibly at the mature stage, or just maybe you're hitting a wall? This has happened to me. You might just be hitting a wall and you actually haven't fully matured. You just need to work through something. So let's go through three major signs that you're in maturity and approaching decline. So, sign number one is what used to be energizing to you now feels routine. You're still doing the same things and they still work actually, but they don't ignite you anymore. I've been here recently actually and had to wrestle through questions like, is it just me? Is it just me that I'm feeling mature, but actually we're still moving forward? Do I need to just push through? Am I looking at this the right way? Or has something shifted in my environment or inside of me? So, those are just some internal questions to ask yourself. And then sometimes also maturity shows up in a positive situation. Things are going well, autopilot is on, but the joy isn't there. And that's kind of where I was recently is, things were going well and actually progressing, but I lost a little bit of my joy and momentum because I actually matured in an area. I hit a wall, so to speak, or the top that I could take it, and somebody else needed to take it further. Other times, it could be negative situation is impacting you. Maybe you're leading well, but your leader isn't leading you. In other words, you're pulling them up instead of being developed, and you've kind of reached the climax there, the peak of your leadership ability based on who is leading you or the team that you're leading. Either way, the result is the same. Energy is drained, and it's a sign you're in the mature stage, and it's time to evaluate, well, what's next? Another way to recognize that you might be in the mature stage is you're maintaining, not growing. As leaders, at least I view it as, we always want to be part of continuous improvement. It's not to make change to change. This podcast is change agent leadership. We want to change, but not just to change. Why do we want to change? Well, we want to take things to the next level. Well, sometimes if we're just maintaining, we have not been able to continue to think through what does continuous improvement look like. So in other words, meetings look the same, your habits look the same, your team looks the same. When I say looks the same, if you reflected back 3, 6 months or a year, have you progressed at the rate and the direction you wanted to go? Or have you matured, so to speak, at that level? In other words, you're in a steady rhythm, but momentum has plateaued. It's just like losing energy. This lack of vision creates a vicious cycle in our mind. Your mind gets foggy. Maybe you stop thinking long term. This is subtle. This isn't like an overnight shift, but you start not thinking long term. You start believing, is this all there is? And it becomes harder to dream because you're too busy maintaining and wondering, how do I break out of this maintaining cycle? So that might be you. That's another one. And then the third sign is you feel a low grade dream stirring within you, but you ignore it. And I'll be honest, before I get into this one, I've had all three of these happen at different times. And that's why I'm sharing this. This is personal to me. This is the place where leaders often get stuck in this third one, because the safe dream and the true dream are risk averse maybe at times. So the safe dream is, yeah, we're just going to hit the next goal. We're going to increase 2%, 3%, and we're just going to maintain. That's basically, to me, is maintaining. Well, what is the true dream? What are you really feeling called to? Where are you now? Where have you been matured in your leadership or in life that's enabling you to do something else that might be a 10x in your life? Like, and when I say 10x, I'm not talking just performance, but takes you from, yeah, I can do it, to, wow, that would be game changer in my life. And I can get so excited about that. It might not be where I'm at now at my current business or my location. Maybe you start something on your own, but is that true dream? And this issue isn't just something that's new on the horizon. The issue is that somewhere along the way, we stopped perceiving what could be. So did you have a spark inside of you and you just kind of put it on the shelf? But now that shelf has a lot of dust. So maybe, like me, you've been looking down at the current situation too long and you stopped looking ahead. In other words, we anticipated that, accepted this is all there is, and that's all that ever can be. It's a mindset. So if that's you, we want to break that cycle today and redream together. No matter which one of those three, maybe there's a hybrid of those three that's affecting you, but we want to break that cycle because we don't want to stagnate and turn from maturity stagnation to decline. Excuse me. So let's apply the redream framework for our personal life as well as our business and leadership life. So let's make this practical. Think about your life in 5 areas, and you can label these however you want, but I think of them, first of all, my spiritual or my meditation life. So whatever your life is, how are you reflecting daily to be re-energized? Whatever that is. I don't know how you re-energize, but whatever that is, that's number one. Number two is your health. How are you having healthy habits? Number three is relationships. Number four is leadership habits. What are those growth habits? And then number five is your calling and your dream. That should always be part of your cycle, is evaluating your calling and your dream and then working on that. Otherwise, you're just going to stagnate. So ask yourself, in those 5 areas, where have I matured? Where have I stopped growing? So is it in your quiet time? Is it in your meditation time? Is it your energy level? Has it just matured? How about your communication? Have you continued to improve in your communication? Your creativity, your marriage rhythms, whatever that looks like, your physical health, your leadership, whatever rises to the top, write it down, and we'll go and keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this episode. This is also a good time to mention that you can download the free toolkit for this episode. The link is in the show notes. Those are a multi-page, just a highlight you can go along with this episode and fill in the blanks many times. And if you want a more multi-page leadership development toolkit that is usually about 5 or 6 letter-sized pages that you can walk through your team with, you can actually lead them in an exercise. It's like usually they're designed for a 2-hour workshop. Check out the subscription link in the show notes as well. So the question is, where might I be declining? Remember, I mentioned this earlier, decline is subtle. It doesn't just sneak up, it actually sneaks up on you. It doesn't just pounce on you. So again, where is it subtle? So where are you more distracted? You're less consistent, less joyful. You're maybe more tired or more reactive in situation, less hopeful. Feeling any of those things that your mindset is not where it should be. And then remember, you're not falling apart, but you are drifting. And drift is the enemy of your calling. I mean, that is a key takeaway for today. Drifting in your life is the enemy of your calling, because the more you drift, the more you will forget what your calling is. Maturity is not the moment to stop straining for what's next. It's actually the moment that you need to redream. So use the toolkit to walk through this process, and instead of a New Year's resolution that none of us will likely keep, pick an area you want to redream and process how you will live that out in this next year. So we've talked about, how to reflect on what's declining. Well, let's zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to put up another chart. So keep in mind that as in the second image I put up, we talk about arriving to mature. Instead of moving into decline, we move into redream. Well, this third chart is a reminder that you need to zoom out, that leadership develops in eras, not just events. We didn't arrive at this era, at this event on the second slide, and now we're just going to move into decline. No, this is a cycle you and I have been going through over our lives. So think about your own story, your early passion era. In other words, what got you going in leadership, or what got you going whatever work life you're in, your busy building area? How did you build that? Maybe you're in that area now where you're building and developing and learning and growing. Well, what is that going to lead to? How about your family and foundational area, your calling and clarity area, or even maybe leadership maturity? Again, these are eras. On this screen, you see these 3 eras, and there's multiple S curves that are on here. And so now, where are you? You may be stepping into a brand new area. And if so, it's time to ask you and I ourselves, which area am I stepping out of, and which era do I need to step into? In other words, have I been an era that I've been in, is it an era where I have been maintaining and growing and getting excited about something? And now I need to let that go. I need to bring pieces with me. We're going to talk about that. But what is the next era that needs to begin with a redream? And part of it is the redream. So let's talk about how to redream, the 4 questions to ask. And here is a simple framework I want you to use this month It's not necessarily a one-day thing. With your team, your spouse, or just, I would encourage you to start with yourself. What is this? Number one, what has matured in my life or leadership? In other words, what's become smooth, predictable, or routine? And write that down. Number two, what is quietly declining in my life? In other words, where am I losing energy, passion, clarity, effectiveness? Number three, what needs to be redreamed? In other words, not restarted. This isn't a complete restart. It's what needs to be renewed, refreshed, re-energized. There's another re-word out there somewhere. But whatever it is, you need to redream that area. So what needs to be redreamed? And then number four, what is one small step that you can take this week? So again, this is not a big dream. This is really a small spark, but it's that one step that will lead to that next stage in life. Small sparks start new curves. And this is what leaders do. They don't just see decline, they light the torch for what season is next, what era is next. So we started with the bell curve. We want to move past the bell curve into the redream. We zoomed out a little bit into the epic tail thing. You saw that on your screen, which is moving into different eras. And you want to reflect on what era are you in? Where have you been and where do you want to go? And as a leader, I do want to highlight, they talk about this in the book about being a torchbearer. And they call leaders torchbearers. And so people don't just see the destination. This isn't just about where you're going. This is really important as we enter a new season of life, a new era. We want to illuminate the path for ourselves and for others. Many times we just want to know, where am I going and how do I get there? But we want to be able to illuminate what's next. And they talk about 5 things that torchbearers do. They speak. In other words, they tell what's happening around them, where they're going. They tell stories to remind people of where they've been, what has happened, and where they should probably consider going in the future that's related to past stories. Create rituals. In other words, what are habits that we want to carry on? 4, they use symbols that inspire. In other words, what are mile markers that we can use? But the most important one I want to cover today is they listen. They emphasize and they empathize and they understand the traveler's fear when stepping out into a new curve. It's dangerous waters, right? It's unknown territory. Every time you redream your life, your team, you're stepping into a new role. And each of us are leading someone or some project. If not at a minimum, we're leading ourselves. So this year, as a torchbearer, a challenge is for us to listen for cues up to what stage people are in, and listen for cues for ourselves. What stage am I in? At the beginning, I talked about, are you starting to lose momentum and drive and other things? So again, listen to those cues in your life and write them down. And then also speak truth into those moments. It's not that if you're starting to stagnate, that's a failure. It may be a time to redream. And then last, share stories that remind people to redream again. And the person you have to share those stories with first is actually yourself. Many times we get in our heads that things are declining or we're in a bad spot. I have an episode on active waiting. And part of that active waiting is talking to ourselves and reminding ourselves that we always go negative. So how are things going well that we just don't see? This is where leadership looks like a redream cycle instead of going into decline. We need to be able to assess where we are and move ourselves and others into a redream cycle. So I'm going to give you just a couple really quick tools for this week. Number 1 is a 7-day challenge to just do in the next 7 days. And choose one action to reignite momentum. So pick one of these. You could pick a couple of them. You could be a 15-minute prayer meditation time just to reflect as to where you are. Another one is a single health habit. What is, if you felt that your health is declining and you want to do it, well, what is one single health habit? Well, how do I reconnect with one person? That might be another one. Maybe write down one dream you've been ignoring, that spark that was there, and it's kind of gone out a little bit, but you want to reignite that. So write it down and consider meditating on what would that look like to redream. And then last, I'd encourage each of us to block 90 minutes for strategic thinking time. In other words, take an hour and a half. I know it's a lot of time, but go through this toolkit in the 90 minutes that you can download and rethink, redream what would it look like for you to redream this next year, to reignite that spark and to take it on. And the next is era reflection. I had that slide up for eras that we're in. And then ask the question, what was I or who was I in the last era? In other words, was I more of a follower, but now I've moved into a leader? Was I more of a dictator and a micromanager, but actually now I'm actually leading well? So in other words, what am I becoming in the new era? What do I want to become in that new era? Well, I'm progressing in stages. I want to now be fill in the blank. And then think through what can and can't move with you into this next era. In other words, what are some habits you want to leave in that last era? You don't want to bring those with you? But what are things that you want to learn, that you have learned, that you want to take to the next era with you? Those are critical. This is not about starting over. I've mentioned that several times. People get stuck on, oh, I just have to start over from scratch, forgetting the past. No, you do want to ignore the bad stuff, or you don't want to ignore it, actually. You want to learn from it. But how do you take the good things and redream? It's not just starting over. And maybe you do need to just start a new dream. That's fine too. But many times that is overwhelming if that's our beginning stage. So think of those questions to create clarity and courage in your mind. I just want to leave you with this. Your job isn't to necessarily create a new thing. Your job is to perceive what is next and courageously step into it. And that takes time, that takes process. So your challenge this week is, before you end even today, or at least this week, identify one area that needs to be redreamed. Where do you need to go to redream? Write down one small action that you're going to take in the next 7 days. I gave you some options there. Take one or two of those and actually do it in the next 7 days. Share it with somebody you trust to hold you accountable. Someone's not going to judge you, but it's actually going to encourage you and be like, yeah, that I don't know what that spark is, but I'm going to help hold you accountable for that. Remember, small choices shape the next era of your leadership. If this episode added value to your leadership today, which I really hope it did, I hope this redream has been exciting and challenging for you. It honestly has helped me over this last year to just consider where I am, where do I want to go, where have I been stuck, and how do I get out of that rut that I'm in? It wasn't a bad rut, but I was actually stuck a bit. And how do I get out of that? So I hope this is helpful. If it was for you, hit like and subscribe. Drop a comment like, how has this helped you? Download the toolkit. This helps all of us as we learn and grow together. And if you're looking for a coach or want to be on the Change Agent Leadership Podcast as a guest on the podcast or as a coaching session with me, click on the show notes. Don't forget to download the toolkit. Until next time, I'm Jonathan Hankin, your Change Agent Coach. I encourage you, please keep questioning, like, where are you in your leadership journey? Keep growing and developing every single day and keep leading change by starting with yourself.